Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to our buddy read of Mr. Scarborough's Family by Anthony Trollope. Uh, I missed a day yesterday. Sorry about that. I'm feeling a little under the weather, but I didn't want to let the story wait for too long. So we will read the next chapter in this story about the eponymous Mr. Scarborough, who has realized that although he likes his eldest son, Montjoy, more than he likes his slimy younger son, Augustus, Montjoy will ruin his property at Tretton Park thanks to gambling debts if something isn't done. And that might have presented Mr. Scarborough with one version of a something years ago, which would obviously be to pay the creditors himself. But the debts have now gone so great that there's no way to do that, and that presents Mr. Scarborough with another possibility, which he shocks the world by taking, which is to declare Montjoy illegitimate with a stack of papers that he hands to the family lawyer, Mr. Gray, proving it. If Montjoy is disinherited, then his creditors are out of luck with all the money that he's raised against the prospect of inheriting Tretton Park. And all that property now will go down to Augustus. This rattles Captain Scarborough, or Captain Montjoy, who goes to a young woman named Florence Montjoy, his first cousin, to explain the matter to her, hopefully in good terms, because they have been, at least in his mind, unofficially engaged to be married for the whole of their adult life. Not so in Florence's mind, as quickly becomes obvious to the captain. She is in love with someone else. She doesn't name the person, but it's obvious to the captain who that is. It's a young man named Harry Ainsley, who we then meet, who has luscious, wavy hair and a handsome face, and is neither tall nor short, neither fat nor slim, but he's pretty and he's earnest, and he loves her. But we're told that he has a little bit of a weakness in his lip. What is that weakness? Does it betoken a personal weakness, a personal shortcoming? Well, it might, because when Harry and Captain Scarborough are in town, late at night, when both of them have been drinking, in a side street, alone, without anyone to witness it, they meet and fight. The captain lays hands on Harry Ainsley, and Harry Ainsley strikes him down to the pavement, and he is there and unmoving when Harry leaves him, and is horrified the next day and the next week to realize that no one has seen him since then. That Harry quickly realizes from the stories in the newspaper that only grow longer and more frequent, from inquiries to strangers, it's the talk of the town, that he was the last person to see Montjoy alive. And doesn't tell anyone. Most pointedly, he does not tell the police. Even though he becomes more and more aware, especially the more he talks with Augustus Scarborough, who's also an old friend of his, that the police are connecting him. They're noticing that he's been asking all of these questions. They don't know what happened in that fatal 5 minutes. It is a black box. There were only two people there. But Harry says nothing and rebuffs the idea by Constable Prodgers, a policeman that actually knows him by name, that he might be involved in any way, and accepts Augustus Scarborough's invitation to go down to Tretton Park for some partridge shooting and to meet with old Mr. Scarborough, who is sick and dying. It's not a happy visit at all. Augustus Scarborough seems mainly to want to interrogate Harry, and that is mainly because during a scene earlier when Harry is at Augustus's rooms at the Inns of Court and is having just a supper, Augustus asks him directly, "When was the last time you saw my brother?" And Harry lies. For the first time, he tells a bald-faced lie. He names a time when he saw Montjoy Scarborough in company of others, and does not mention their late night meeting. And this prompts Augustus to question him, and Harry doesn't like that. And the interviews that he has with old Mr. Scarborough are no more friendly. He keeps up the pretenses as well as he can, but then he leaves, and that brings us to where we are now. Harry has just left, and that leaves Augustus Scarborough at Tretton Park with a hanger-on of his, Septimus Jones, who's one of those hanger-ons that wealthy men always seem to have, that will echo whatever they say, don't seem to have a life of their own. And that is the conversation that starts this chapter. This is chapter 9. That's an impertinent young puppy, said Septimus Jones, as soon as the fly which was to carry Harry Annesley to the station had left the hall door on the following morning. It may be presumed that Mr. Jones would not have thus expressed himself unless his friend Augustus Scarborough had dropped certain words in conversation in regard to Harry to the same effect. It may also be presumed that Augustus would not have dropped such words without the purpose of letting his friend know that Harry was to be abused. Augustus Scarborough had made up his mind, looking at the matter all round, that more was to be got by abusing Harry than by praising him. The young man has a good opinion of himself, certainly. He's only saying this to egg Septimus Jones on. He thinks himself to be a deal better than anybody else, continued Jones, whereas I, for one, don't see it. And he has a way with him of pretending to be quite equal with his companions, let them be who they may, which to me is odious. Actually, it would be to you, you worm. He was down upon you and down upon your father. Of course, your father has made a most fraudulent attempt, but what is it to him? The other young man made no answer, but only smiled. The opinion expressed by Mr. Jones was, to Harry Annesley, had only been a reflex of what was felt by Augustus Scarborough. But the reflex, as is always the case when the looking-glass is true, was correct. Reflex here meaning reflection. Augustus is just hearing from Septimus Jones what he has taught Septimus Jones to say and think. Scarborough had known Harry Annesley for a long time, as time is counted in early youth, and had by degrees learned to hate him thoroughly. He was a little the elder, and had at first thought to domineer over his friend, but the friend had resisted, and had struggled manfully to achieve what he considered an equality in friendship. Now, Scarborough, you may as well take it for once and for all that I am not going to be talked down. If you want a fellow to talk down, you can go to Walker or Brown or Green, and then when you are tired of the occupation, you can come back to me. It was thus that Harry Annesley had been wont to address his friend. But his friend had been anxious to talk down to this special young man for special purposes, and had been conscious of some weakness in the other's character which he thought entitled him to do so. The lip. But the weakness was not of that nature, and he failed. Then had come the rivalry between Montjoy and Harry, which had seemed to Augustus to be of extreme impudence. From of old he had been taught to regard his brother Montjoy as the first of young men among commoners, the first in prospect and the first in rank, and to him Florence Montjoy had been allotted as a bride. How he had himself learned first to envy and then to covet this allotted bride need not here be told. Perhaps we'll learn a little more of it, but it is a gross thing. Augustus Scarborough seems to think that the prospective bride comes with the property. We don't know at this point in the novel if he's spoken 10 words to Florence Montjoy. And he doesn't care that he hasn't. But by degrees it had come to pass that Augustus had determined that his spendthrift brother should fall under his own power, and that the bride should be the reward. How it was that the two brothers, so different in characters, and yet so alike in their selfishness, should have come to love the same girl with a true intensity of purpose, and that Harry Annesley, whose character was essentially different and who was in no degree selfish, should have loved her also, must be left to explain itself as the girl's character shall be developed. I'm studiously avoiding spoilers as much as I can in this novel, but I wouldn't hold your breath waiting for Florence's character to be developed. Trollope runs hot or cold on his female characters. Just that, hot or cold. He either perfectly conceives them, usually with comedy, but not always, or he is just going to turn out only a shop girl type thing where they're just a one-dimensional sounding board of conventional virtue. He very seldom takes you down the middle, which we're seeing in this book. I mean, Mr. Scarborough is a great example of a great character, but Augustus Scarborough is more or less just a tepid villain. Don't you worry, though. The fact that I don't think, maybe you'll fall in love with Florence Montjoy the more we learn about her. Maybe you will, maybe you won't. But the fact that I don't think she's all that well developed as the book goes on does not leave us empty of great female characters. There are two. We haven't met them yet, but you're going to love them. One more than the other, I think. But anyway. But Florence Montjoy had now for many months been the cause of a bitter dislike against poor Harry in the mind of Augustus Scarborough. He understood, much more clearly than his brother had done, who it was that the girl really preferred. He was ever conscious, too, of his own superiority, falsely conscious, and did feel that if Harry's character were really known, no girl would in truth prefer him. He could not quite see Harry with Florence's eyes, nor could he see himself with any other eyes but his own. Then had come the meeting between Mountjoy and Harry Annesley in the street, of which he had only such garbled account as Mountjoy himself had given him within an hour and a half of afterwards. From that story, told in the words of a drunken man, a man drunk and bruised and bloody, who clearly did not understand one minute the words spoken in the last, Augustus had learned that there had been some great row between his brother and Harry Annesley, that Mountjoy had disappeared, as the reader will have understood, with his brother's cooperation, and Harry had not come forward when the enquiries were made to declare what he knew of the occurrences that night. All this time, when Augustus Scarborough has been saying to Harry Annesley and to his own father, "I don't think he's dead. Oh, I don't think he's fled the country. Or maybe he has fled the country. I don't know." All this time, Harry Annesley has known that his brother is alive. His brother went straight to him. We're told right after what was it again? Half an hour afterwards, his brother went to him, bloodied and bruised and drunk, and told him everything. That's the chapter's bombshell. Augustus had narrowly watched his conduct, in order at first that he might learn in what condition his brother had been left in the street, but afterwards with the purpose of ascertaining why it was that Harry had been so reticent. Then he had allured Harry on to a direct lie, and soon perceived that he could afterwards use the secret for his own purposes. "I think we shall have to see what that young man's about, you know," he said afterwards to Septimus Jones. "Yes, certainly," said Septimus, but Septimus did not quite understand why it was that they should have to see what the young man was about. "Between you and me, I think he means to interfere with me, and I do not mean to stand his interference." "I should think not. He must go back to Boston among the Bostonians, and he and I will have a stand-up fight. I rather like a stand-up fight." Just so. When a fellow's so bumptious as that, he ought to be licked." "He has lied about Mountjoy," said Augustus. Then Jones waited to be told how it was that Harry had lied. He was aware that there was some secret unknown to him, and was anxious to be informed. Was Harry aware of Mountjoy's hiding place, and if so, how had he learned it? Why it was that Harry should be acquainted with it, which was dark to all the world beside? Jones was of the opinion that the squire knew all about it, and thought it not improbable that the squire and Augustus had the secret in their joint keeping. But if so, how should Harry Annesley know anything about it? "He has lied like the very deuce," continued Augustus, after a pause. "Has he now? And I don't mean to spare it." "I should think not." Then there was a pause, at the end of which Jones found himself driven to ask a question. How has he lied?" Augustus smiled and shook his head, from which the other man gathered that he was not now to be told the nature of the lie in question. "A fellow that lies like that," said Jones, "is not to be endured." He doesn't know how that lie is, but he knows enough now to parrot his master's voice. "I do not mean to endure him. You have heard of a young lady named Miss Mountjoy, a cousin of ours?" "What, Mountjoy's Miss Mountjoy?" "Yes, Mountjoy's Miss Mountjoy. That, of course, is over. Mountjoy has brought himself to such a pass that he is not entitled to have a Miss Mountjoy any longer. It seems the proper thing that she shall pass with the rest of the family property to the true heir." "You marry her?" "We need not talk about that just at present. I don't know that I've made up my mind. At any rate, I do not intend to let Harry Annesley shall have her." The rest of the family property? God, no wonder Mr. Scarborough doesn't prefer this son to the other. "I should think not." That's all that Septimus Jones could say. "He's a pestilential cur who's got himself introduced into the family, and the sooner we get quit of him, the better. I should think the young lady would hardly fancy him when she knows that he has lied with the object of getting her former lover out of the way." "By Jove, no, I should think not." "And when the world comes to understand that Harry Annesley, in the midst of all these inquiries, knows all about poor Mountjoy, was the last to see him in London, and has never come forward to say a word about him, then I think the world will be a little hard upon the immaculate Harry Annesley. His own uncle has quarrelled with him already." "What uncle?" "The gentleman down in Hertfordshire, on the strength of whose acres Master Harry is flaunting it about in idleness. I have my eyes open, and can see as well as another. When Harry lectures me about my father, and my father about me, one would suppose that there is not a hole in his own coat. I think he'll find that the garment is not altogether watertight." Then Augustus, finding that he had told as much as he was needful to Septimus Jones, left his friend and went about his family business. On the next morning, Septimus Jones took his departure, and on the day following, Augustus followed him. "So you're off," said the father, when he came to make his adieu. "Well, yes, I suppose so. A man's got so many things to look after which he can't attend to down here." "I don't know what they are, but you understand it all. I'm not going to ask you to stay." "Does it ever occur to you that you may never see me again?" What a question. I'm sure that he doesn't care. It is one that requires an answer, at any rate." "It does occur to me, but not at all as probable." "And why not probable?" "Because there's a telegraph wire from Tretton to London, and because the journey down here is very short. It also occurs to me to think so from what has been said by Sir William Broderick, the high-priced doctor from London. Of course, any man may die suddenly, especially when the surgeons have been at him. You have your sister with you, sir, and she will be of more comfort to you than I can. Your condition is in some respects an advantage to you. These creditors of Montjoy's can't force their way in upon you." "You are wrong there." "Well, they have not done so." "Nor should they, though I were as strong as you. What are Montjoy's creditors to me? They have not a scrap of my handwriting in their possession. There is not one who can say that he has ever even a verbal promise from me. They never came to me when they wanted to lend him money at 50%. Did they ever hear me say that he was my heir? Perhaps not. No one has ever heard it. It was not to them that I lied, but to you and Gray. The creditors. What do I care for them, though they all be ruined?" "Not in the least. Why do you talk to me about the creditors? You, at any rate, know the truth." Then Augustus quitted the room, leaving his father in a passion. But as a fact, he was by no means assured as to the truth. He supposed that he was the heir, but might it not be possible that his father had contrived all this to save the property from Montjoy, and that greedy pack of moneylenders? Gray must surely know the truth, but why should not Gray be deceived on the second event as he was on the first? There was no limit, Augustus sometimes thought, to his father's cleverness. This idea had occurred to him within the last week, and his mind was tormented by reflecting on what might yet be his condition. But of one thing he was sure, that his father and Montjoy were not in league together. Montjoy at any rate believed himself to have been disinherited. Montjoy conceived that his only chance of obtaining money arose from his brother, and the circumstances of Montjoy's absence were at any rate unknown to his father. So all of a sudden, that's the end of the chapter, and all of a sudden it's not just Harry Annesley who's keeping information from a dying man, and also from the police. The bombshell of this chapter is that Augustus Scarborough knows perfectly well what happened. He knows there was that fatal 5 minutes. He knows that his brother and Harry Annesley quarreled, and that it was physical. So that is the bombshell of that chapter. Now Augustus Scarborough will leave the dying man and go back to London. Harry Annesley has gone back to London, and we can probably assume that the action will decamp to London relatively soon after this. So with any luck, I will be in a little bit more vim and vigor to read that chapter 2 next time. Hope you're all enjoying this. I hear from my emails that you all are, very much so. And I've also been very touched, very pleased at how many of you are forcing yourself not to read ahead. You're just letting me read you this story. That is really neat. That's really neat. Anyway, I'm going to wrap this up for now. Sorry for no other videos, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.